It's time now for the press review. France 24's own Solange Moujon joining us on the set. Hello to you, Solange.
I will.
Beginning, no surprise, with our top story here, the violence in Kazakhstan. How are the papers covering the unrest?
Well, the Kazakhstani daily leader, which is privately owned and pro-government, well, it is focusing on casualties, but namely those of security officers. The paper does not mention the number of protesters, which it calls terrorists, that have been killed. It is keen, though, to explain that hundreds of military personnel have been affected, with over a dozen dead and 2 beheaded. Now, the Russian press is also discussing the situation. The Moscow Times, it is actually taking a critical view of Russia's involvement, saying the Kremlin is being sucked into neighboring unrest, and it could create instability and consequences because it could hurt Vladimir Putin's electoral ratings at home and therefore make him doubt his own popularity, which could in turn make him tighten his grip on power. Now, for Libération, the French paper, Russia's involvement is a message by Moscow to the West that first, it can very quickly intervene abroad if it feels its own interests are at stake, and second, that former Soviet countries are its own zone of influence, a sort of hands-off our area approach that the New York Times tackles with a warning that once, quote, once Russian troops arrive, they seldom, if ever, go home, end quote. Proof, the paper says, that Moscow is trying to turn this into what it calls an opportunity of influence.
Now to the United States, where the press is largely covering President Joe Biden's speech on the first anniversary of the January 6th Capitol riots.
Yeah, a speech that is equal to anything that JFK or Barack Obama wrote, and, quote, Biden at his best. That is how much praise is coming from some media in the U.S., like Politico, which is showering praise on Biden's speech. The Tonight says that Democrats hope that this marks a turning point where the White House focuses on mitigating Republican threats to democracy. But more serious damage to American democracy could be ahead. The Washington Post's cartoonist Michael DeAdder notes that the GOP's election meddling is the next drop that democracy is facing as a sort of close, as is its next sort of close call. But it is still over a barrel or hopelessly floating down in a barrel.
A lot of praise from those publications, but how's the conservative press covering the anniversary?
Well, for the Washington Times, the Democrats are making an absurdity of it. The site argues that voters are more concerned about their own personal struggles than about, quote, big government's smearing of Republicans as unpatriotic. But the Wall Street Journal, well, it takes another take. Its editorial board argues that contesting the last election has already cost Republicans dearly, that vindicating 2020 is not key to victory in 2022. Rather, forgetting it and Trump is.
All right. Well, now to Novak Djokovic's saga in Australia, spilling quite a bit of ink.
Yeah, let's start with the fun puns over the vaccine skeptics. Imbroglio in Australia, as the Parisien put it, it's Novax Djokovic that's just become tennis's most divisive figure, while the UK's Metro, it says that what's going on is a prison cell joke, referring here to the Serbian tennis star's detention in a hotel that houses asylum seekers.
And no joke for Serbian papers, even if other papers are loving this story.
Yeah, the widely read Serbian daily Courier says Australia is using the tennis star as a scapegoat because he tweeted about his exemption visa before his arrival. And it argues that this is actually a political move by Australia's Prime Minister, but perhaps there's just a little bit less tolerance for a man who, according to Peter Brooks's cartoon, has become the world's #1 self-obsessed, entitled anti-vaxxer, whose stances against vaccines did not curry favor with public opinion or border guards, who didn't buy his saying in Harman's cartoon. You see there's no risk. I'll be playing at the back of the court beyond the baseline. But as Fox Sports Australia tells us, Aussies have drawn a line at exemptions. Rather, they're roasting Djokovic in memes, with the favorite being Ryanair's tweet asking if he is flying home since he's been sidelined or has sidelined himself from the Australian Open.
All right. Thank you very much, Solange. Solange Moujon with the press review there. And if you'd like to see more of the press review, you can go to our website, France24.com.